Member for Castro South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this legislation affects two members on the government side and affects two members on this side. The member for Castries East is not present. I'd have loved to hear from the members on the government side some of the concerns and responses to the comments made by the member from Beaufort South, but I don't seem to see any inclination to speak on this bill. But of course, this bill would affect Castries South. And Mr. Speaker, member from Bawuro, again, I'm not a lawyer, Mr. Speaker, so I read the bill and my mind functions like a layman, and the concepts that come in my head forces me to ask some questions. And I want to make some general comments, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as far as I know, in 2015, there had been numerous consultations with a view to passing a local authorities bill. And I believe when we had elections and the government changed, there was actually before Council, Castries Constituency Council, a draft of a bill, a Local Authorities Act, a draft, Mr. Speaker. I am not sure why the process which followed abandoned this document and instead proceeded with the product that we have before us today, with a Castries Constituency Council Act or bill. The member from Beaufort South says it's for probably primarily the purpose of the vanity of an individual. But I was hoping that the minister would be here and at least explain why this draft, and I've had a chance to read it, Mr. Speaker, and I must say it's quite admirable. It provides for the return of elections to the local government authorities. It is very detailed and explicit in what local government authorities can do and cannot do. And I believe the previous government has spent monies to get this draft prepared. And I have a copy of it, and I'm sure other persons on the Castries Constituency Council would have copies of it. But it appears that this was abandoned. And instead, we have a Castries Constituency Council bill before us. And I'm wondering, having listened to the member from Beaufort South, whether or not this is probably even deeper than just enhancing our local government in St. Lucia. And Mr. Speaker, I want to express some concerns about the functioning of the Castries Constituency Council as a way of expressing my deep concern as to where this can go, and especially noting the comments made by the member for Beaufort South. Mr. Speaker, I see in the bill reference to, and I think Section 5, the constituency of Central Castries is declared to be a municipal city. The constituencies of Castries North, Castries East, and Castries South are declared to be municipal districts. What is a district? And what is a city? So Castries Central is a city now. Castries South, Castries North, Castries East are districts. Now, I knew St. Lucia had a certain number of districts. That's what I grew up learning at school. But according to this act, Castries South is now a district. But this is what this says: a municipal district. Now, do you move from district to village to town to city? Because Castries Central is now a city. Castries South is a district. I am going to go tonight in Castries South once this is passed, and I will boast that we're now a district. We stand on our own. We are a district. And we just like Well, I don't even know if I could say we just like Groseley, because Groseley is a town. So do you move? How do you move? How do you get that designation, Mr. Speaker? I'm really lost by it. And I wish the minister was here, or certainly the member of Catchy Southeast can explain to me what's the difference between a city, a municipal city, and a municipal district. So is a municipal district the same as the districts we knew growing up that St. Lucia had a number of districts? Now, Mr. Speaker, on the lighter side, if you look at the bill, and listen to this, Mr. Speaker, it says a police station, and listen to this one, a police station means Castries City Police Station located within the municipality. So when they refer to police station, they talk about the Castries City Police Station. But do you know, according to this bill, that the Castries City Police Station is not in Castries City? Because Castries City now is Central Castries. The city police station, the Castries Police Station, is in Castries East. I hope they realize that. So when you speak of Castries City Police Station, that police station is actually not in Castries City. And Castries City now is probably the only city in the world that does not have a police station. Because I don't know of any police station in Castries Central. So we have a bill that speaks of a Castries City Police Station, which is not in Castries City. And we have a Castries City that doesn't have a police station. So what's a city? And what's a district? I wish somebody would explain that to me. And like I said, I'm not a lawyer, Mr. Speaker. So when I take those documents, I read them as a layman, trying to understand what sense that makes, Mr. Speaker. The member for Vieux-Fort South raised the issue about the Constituencies Commission, the Boundaries Commission, and the Castries Constituency Council. Now, what I'm trying to understand, Mr. Speaker, if for some reason, and this bill says Castries South, Castries North, Castries East as districts, and Castries Central as a city, if for some realignments, Castries South now becomes Castries Southwest, are we no longer a district? Can somebody explain that to me? And again, I'm saying in my very simple understanding, if Castries Southwest if Castries South becomes Castries Southwest, do we drop out of being a district? I don't know, because this mentions specific areas. Castries South is a district, or do you have to come and amend this and say now Castries Southwest? Now, in this draft I saw for the local authorities bill in 2015 that was being circulated, they actually have some very elegant ways of dealing with those issues. I mean, I don't want to necessarily go for it right now, Mr. Speaker, but I think it is quite elegant in how it is. And if you permit me, I probably would read it to explain to you how it would have dealt with those issues. So, for example, it says, Cabinet may, by order published in the Gazette, declare any area in St. Lucia to be a municipality or a district for the purposes of this Act, and define, alter, restrict, or enlarge the boundaries of such municipality or district. So it actually says how one comes to define an area that is a district or is not a district. I don't know if this Act does that. And like I said, if the Boundaries Commission decides to change the name of Castries East or Castries North, does that mean it falls out? And like I said, in my very simple understanding. Mr. Speaker, I also want to focus on the primary reason for this bill. And it speaks of, under Section 7, it's to provide for the good governance of the municipality. Now, Mr. Speaker, I want to be very careful, because the time is maybe a bit premature for me to put out all the issues relating to the good governance of the Castries Constituency Council. I may never have to do it, but I may have to do it. So I'm going to be very limited in some of the things I say this afternoon. But, Mr. Speaker, when one speaks of the Castries Constituency Council and good governance, the two shall never meet. Shall never meet. The Castries Constituency Council has become synonymous with bad governance, irregular practices, and some might even say bordering on corruption. That's what people, the average St. Lucian, has gotten to understand the Castries Constituency Council to be. In fact, Mr. Speaker, there was an audit, there was a public announcement of an audit being done in the Castries Constituency Council. I think it was conducted by a lady, I would like to mention names of persons who are not in the House, but it was undertaken. It has never been made a public document. That was last year. It has never been made a public document. And today we come into this House to discuss a bill relating to the same Castries Constituency Council. The document, the report, the audit has never been made a public document. Never been made a public document, Mr. Speaker. And your time will come, don't worry, don't worry. Mr. Speaker, let me just indicate to you a simple matter. A councillor is, or the mayor is suing one of his councillors for calling him corrupt. Deny it. The mayor is suing one of the councillors for calling him corrupt. The councillor said the mayor is absolutely corrupt, and he went on, and the mayor has sued him. It's a matter before the courts. Now, how do you have good governance in an entity? And how does this bill deal with matters like that? This is a serious matter. I'm not saying one is right or the other is wrong. But if a councillor can say that his mayor is corrupt and he's been sued and there's a matter playing out in public, and when the case is being heard, I'm sure it's going to attract a lot of attention. How does this bill deal with some of those issues, Mr. Speaker? And Mr. Speaker, we know the history of the government when it comes to using towns and village councils, Mr. Speaker, for corrupt purposes. And Mr. Speaker, we have the review of the financial operations of town, village, and rural councils, Mr. Speaker, a document that was sent to the DPP for action to be taken, and which was never done. It will someday, Mr. Speaker, probably come back on the table again. Mr. Speaker, that's the history of using councils, Mr. Speaker. And some people like to go and take past reports and quote unquotes. It's a little premature. We're not doing that just yet, Mr. Speaker. The time will come. But that's the DNA of this government with towns and village councils. And the Castries Constituency Council is proving to be no different. No different, Mr. Speaker. The way in which the council is managed, Mr. Speaker, leaves a lot to be desired. Mr. Speaker, I spoke to 4 councillors and asked them about this bill being debated here today. They did not even know this was coming before Parliament. Councillors, huh? They did not even know this was coming before Parliament. They did not even know. That's how councillors are left out of the operations of the Castries Constituency Council. Left out. Decisions have been taken with no approval from the council. I asked my representative on the council over and over, can you tell me how much did it cost to refurbish the office of the Castries Constituency Council? And he keeps saying to me, this has never come before council. It was never approved by council. They have no idea how much was spent. Imagine that. Hundreds of thousands of dollars never came for approval before council, Mr. Speaker. And there's a lot more to say about that renovation and the contractor and the whole circular network, but that's for another time in another place, Mr. Speaker. This is the council we come here today to discuss this bill all about, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, for the last quarter of last year, or is it the last 4 months, the council, Mr. Speaker, lost over $1.3 million, Mr. Speaker, between September and December. Lost over $1.3 million. The council is expected to lose many more millions of dollars this year, well, from 2019, April 2019. This is the council, huh? And if I had time, I'd calculate the figures. Probably would lose $3 or $4 million in the coming financial year. In the last 4 months of last year alone, council lost $1.4 million, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in 2017, council got about over $300,000 for National Day. Over $300,000 for National Day. Last year, they got about $18,000. And I asked, where did the money go? Because I heard the Taiwanese was contributing to National Day celebrations in the city, and a grant was being given. But somewhere along the line, the grant got choked. Some ministry somewhere, I don't know. But council cannot report receiving the monies for National Day celebrations. Right here, we're discussing a bill pertaining to that same council. National Day in December last year. And whilst we're speaking about that, you would hear stories, Mr. Speaker, that performers have not been paid. And when you ask the performers, why you've not been paid, how much was your contract? And they say X amount. And then you're going to find out that the amount that was paid to somebody else was twice that amount. No systems, no checks and balances for the management of the affairs of the council. And I'm not giving specifics, Mr. Speaker. I'm not giving specifics. But you get the point I'm making, Mr. Speaker. It gets interesting, Mr. Speaker. I want you to hear this. I see a note there on cemetery, Mr. Speaker. Almost anybody who dies in Castries South now gets a burial spot at half price. Now, I like that when they get burial spots at half price. In fact, from now on, everyone who dies, I will tell them, go to the city Castries Constituency Council to get their half price burial. Now, free. So, you're moving from sleepy to dead. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, it's a good thing persons who are suffering and cannot afford getting discounts. But I hope Castries North can get discount, and Castries East can get discount, and Castries Central can get discounts. But that's another story, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you hear stories, Mr. Speaker, of a trip to Trinidad that costed, Mr. Speaker, about $50,000. A mayor's trip to Trinidad that cost about $50,000. A trip to Trinidad, Mr. Speaker. Not even the Prime Minister travel bills are that high. They higher? Mr. Speaker. Here's an interesting one, Mr. Speaker. Here's an interesting one. Mr. Speaker, National Day, there was a National Day Planning Committee for National Day celebrations. Do you know, between the members on the planning committee and so-called consultants, $100,000 was paid? $100,000 paid in stipend to consultants and members of the planning committee for National Day last year, Mr. Speaker. And we asked to discuss a bill empowering the mayor and empowering the Castries Constituency Council, Mr. Speaker. Here's the one I like the most, Mr. Speaker. For the last 2 years, almost 300 hams and turkeys were given at Christmas time. Officially, they were given to staff. But I can tell you, I went to a couple of homes where I was offered ham in Castries South. Mr. Speaker, 260 hams and turkeys, Mr. Speaker. Can you imagine that, Mr. Speaker? I tell you, moving from sleepy to dead. So, Mr. Speaker, there were community outreach expenses, significant amounts of money. And the explanation given is that people did beautification on their own around their home, so they had to give them payment for it. I can read it for you, Mr. Speaker. Persons did work, and then council is paying them to do it on their own. On their own, not official programs, Mr. Speaker. And we are here today, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it goes on and on. And like I said, today is not the day to go into too much detail, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in the documents you will see that the Castries City Constituency Council got an advance on a loan from SLDB. And I'm asking the councillor, what's this loan about? What's the terms and conditions? They said to them, it never came to council. So the Castries Constituency Council is negotiating a loan, is getting an advance from a bank on a loan, but it's not even come to council for approval. Who is approving that? Who is approving it, Mr. Speaker? When in 2016, this council took over, Mr. Speaker, there was almost $5 million in saving deposits. There's just about $2 million now, Mr. Speaker. Just about $2 million. In just about 3 years. Savings completely been depleted. And we are asked to come and empower the same persons, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I know, and the member from Beaufort South spoke of litigation. There's a very ticklish matter. It's ticklish, Mr. Speaker, because employees of the City Council were fired by someone now who is a minister in this present government. At least if he didn't fire them, he gave instructions. And those employees sued the Castries Constituency Council. We fired them. He's your economic advisor now. And he was once described as a bush doctor by somebody else, but I won't go there. Mr. Speaker, there is a judgment of about $2.8 million, which is under appeal. But yet instructions were given to pay out the money to the individuals. So there is an appeal that I believe it has been filed. And again, the minister can clarify whether the appeal has been filed. But when I asked the councillor, I thought you said this has been appealed. He said, well, yeah, but there are also instructions to pay off the people. Now, remember who they were. They were closely associated with a member of the House here because they're from Castries North, largely. Yeah. So, Mr. Speaker, yeah. No, I mean, they were fired because supposedly the person then was no longer, the government had changed and they felt they should change the individuals, the way it was done rightfully. Somebody has to be held accountable and the workers have rights, so an award was made in their favor. But Mr. Speaker, I am very uncomfortable, very, very uncomfortable with this bill. It empowers, it strengthens the Castries Constituency Council, which from all accounts for the last 2.5 years, and there are members on the other side. I don't expect them to say anything because you understand collective responsibility and respect whatnot. But they know deep down inside, they're very uncomfortable with what's happening. I mean, there was a particular councillor who a member on the other side did not nominate to be a councillor again. And that person has now been given a job at the Castries City Council. In fact, I saw him recently in Lakudoy in Cicero at a wake with the mayor. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, this is a very serious matter, a very serious matter. The functioning of the Castries Constituency Council requires some serious attention. And like I said, today is not the day for all the details to come out. It may be necessary to put out all the details. It may not be necessary. But for today, Mr. Speaker, I have to join my colleague from Beaufort South to say there must be a serious reconsideration of this bill. Thank you very much.